Okay, Benny, Beney, Hochman, Hochman. It's a German name. It means a tall man.
Okay, which I would think that the people in the community would certainly say you are a tall man.
Well,
It seems like you have the respect a lot of your peers.
well, the people might say that, but I say that about my community. That's a tall community, a wonderful community.
Well, let's get started then. Well, we're going to start. We're going to go back to your early days. And can you tell me when and where you were born?
I was born in Lodz, Lodz. It's the second largest city in Poland, but actually born in a suburb of Andrzejów. It's a suburb of the big city. The city is 500,000 population, but my birth was in Andrzejów. That's when my parents were in business. They were. My father was a baker, and he owned a little old bakery, and he had a few people working for him. Everything was made by hand. There was no machinery at all. Even the ovens were fired. The baker oven was fired with wood. And then he worked hard and got prosperous. And he built a brand new, about 2 years before the war, brand new place with a beautiful facilities up above living quarters. And in the meantime, his parents came from Germany to Poland. My mother's parents came from the Ukraine to Poland, and they met. My father was a big fellow, he's about 6'4", strong, and my mother was a 5 foot barely, and 100 pounds probably or less. And then I had an older brother, and myself, and a younger sister. My parents insisted that we would get an education. And in Poland in those days, you went 8 years to school. That's what the government would provide, 8 years. And then you're out, you go to work. Well, we went to work since we could walk, we worked. But my brother went through high school because it was a very expensive high school. And my grandpa, my father's father, was the schoolmaster. He was just like superintendent. And then when he graduated from high school, he was honored, and the family was very honored. He was accepted into the military academy in Poland. And then I was in high school. And then my younger sister, she was only 10 years old, and she was in school. We all worked hard. Life was wonderful.
Can I ask, what was the name of your older brother and of your younger sister?
My oldest brother was Bolek and Ruzha.
Bolek and Ruzha?
Ruzha.
Okay.
And then, if you want me to tell you about what life was like.
I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite memory of your mother?
My favorite memory of my mother is, well, she was just a wonderful person. She was a wonderful mother, and she was a wonderful friend. And she's the one that kept us kids entertained. I mean, besides just working, she would take us every few months or so by streetcar from the suburb where we live into the city so we can go see a movie. And in the wintertime, she would take us kids cross-country skiing. And if we had any pleasures, any fun, it was Mother that would take the time and took the time to do it with us. A very, very bright lady, very bright. My father, in his 50 years of life, I know he never seen a movie. He never went anywhere, absolutely no place. He just worked.
Why do you think that was?
What's that?
Why do you think that his life was his work? Why do you think he didn't just like one day go in the streetcar with you?
He just didn't have the time. He just really didn't. He had 21, 22 people working for him, and he just thought he has to be there. And he would work 12, 14 hours a night, 6 nights a week, and then go to bed for about 5 hours. And that was his life, and he just loved it. He didn't miss nothing. About twice a year, he would put on a little a little party, invite a bunch of friends, make a bunch of homemade brew and some homemade wine, and take a porker and a lamb side by side, all dressed up and seasoned, and stick it in the baker oven and bake them together. And the friends come around and rip the meat off and drink the little wine and beer and sing. Singing was always loud singing, you know. And my mother would play the piano, and they would have a ball.
So what, is there a song that you remember from your childhood?
Oh, I remember some. I forgot a lot of them. I do try to, every once in a while, to try to remember to sing the Polish national anthem.
So can you, would I put you on the spot if I would ask you?
Well, I could sing just a few, maybe a couple of lines, maybe.
Well, would you like? Could I ask you?
Oh yeah, well.
I don't want to embarrass you.
No, well, it's not. It's like jeszcze Polska nie zginęła, póki ja tu jestem. Marsz, marsz Dąbrowski, ziemi włoskiej do Polski. Did you understand?
No, could you translate that?
Jeszcze Polska nie zginęła is Poland will never be zginęła, be lost, you know. And then they say some, and as long as we got Dombrowski, he was the big president and he was a general, and then became president. And as long as he is, but that's going way, way back. As long as he is a leader, we will always have a Poland.
Okay.
I taught that to my boy when he was about 6th or 7th grade. And I could remember the whole song, and he saw me and him were canoeing up north here in a sand pit. And he said, "Dad, what are you singing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm singing the Polish national anthem." He said, "Teach it to me." So I taught it to him. And then when school started that fall, the teacher asked him, well, "Did you kids have a good summer, and what did you do, and what did you learned?" And Bruce, he's a character, and that's this guy right there. And he says, "Oh, what was his name? Welch, Mr. Welch," he says, "I've learned something that I bet nobody in the class learned." "Oh, what did you learn?" "Well, I learned the Polish national anthem." He says, "Well, will you sing it for us?" He said, "Yes, I would, if everybody would stand up." So they did, and he sang it.
That's a pretty special memory. Do you have memories like that of your older brother?
Very much so, because we were very close. You know, we worked hard. Us kids, when we were just little, we had our chores, we had our work. We did. There was time to play, but lots of time to work. You had to work alongside the mother. My dad was busy in the bakery and with his men, and my mother had a store in the front where she would sell, but she had a helper. And this lady that worked for us forever, she was just like another mother, you know. And she and my mother would work, so my mother could take time and keep us busy with different chores, you know, and also maybe take us for a walk or do different things, take us.
So do you have a memory of your brother? I mean, I have 4 sons, and,
I have a wonderful memory of my brother. As young kids, you know, just like any other two brothers probably had the good moments and had a little cross, a little fight once in a while, but never serious and always very lovable. Uh, and then the big memory we have, the whole family did, is when he became, after graduating from the military academy, came home in a beautiful uniform, and he was a handsome young man, and this uniform really did it. And he came home, and he was just a pride, and we laughed. Oh, I laughed, not the rest of them, because the rest of them didn't see it. But that night when he took his clothes off, we were going to bed. We still had to sleep together. And he had kind of like a girdle on underneath there, on his uniform, because he was not heavy, but to fit perfect. He was a company commander, and so he was like a captain, a poruchnik. So those are wonderful memories. And
what about your younger sister? Do you have a special memory of something about her or something she did to you once?
Well, she was, when we talk about spoiled, she was spoiled because she was actually my second sister. The first sister that I had was about the same age. She got killed by a bus when my father went across the street to have a horse shoed, a blacksmith. And she ran across, followed him, and a bus came around. We didn't have no cars, but we did have buses, around there and hit her, because so my folks had this, and they named it the same name, so she was kind of special, She was spoiled, but she worked alongside of us. It was wonderful.
Well, when you were a young boy, what was Poland like? You say it was a free society. What do you remember?
Absolutely. We had, well, like us kids, we didn't really know a lot about government. We didn't talk much about government. I think maybe we do that more in America in the school. But we all cherished our freedom. We could, like I say, a mother could take us on a streetcar and go to a movie. We could go cross-country skiing. We would go, in the fall of the year, it was a must. All children would go together to the forest and dig mushrooms when the mushrooms were ripe. And the trees in that part of the country, anyhow, in Poland, I got one sitting right in the front yard. I call it my Polish tree. It's a white birch, and it's a European. This is a European white birch, and mushrooms. And we would go and come home with baskets full of mushrooms, and that was a whole day outing, like when school was out, like on Saturday or Sunday, and bring back. And those mushrooms will be dried, stringed up, and dried, and then all winter long, just take them down and.
Were those like a truffle or something like that?
There were many different kinds of mushrooms. 2 years ago, I asked our tour guide and our driver to stop when we were along that same highway. And there were women with the children sitting along the highway, and they were selling those mushrooms. I didn't have no use for them, we were in a hotel, but the tour guide, she bought a basket full of them. In fact, we bought it for her, and I asked her, I said, could we stop? I want to see the mushrooms. Just 2 years ago.
He just came on. I'm wondering if we can
maybe turn the. Break, but well, we'll go and now talk a little bit about your wartime experience and
Okay.
when in '39 when Hitler's army crossed the Polish border. Of course, your life changed. Um, with everything that you lived through in those approximately 5 years, you went into the camps. You lost your family. Lost your brother right in front of you. Can you tell me, for you, what marked the lowest part of humanity for you in your camp life?
Well, when they came after us, my brother and myself, and they loaded us up in those boxcars, and when we talk about boxcars, you had to be anybody that had to be ever in Europe to see the size of them. They're so much smaller than you see in America, And they would shove 100 of us in there. And to this day, I don't know how many days and nights we were in there traveling, traveling, and the boxcar never opened up. No food, no drink, no nothing. Until we finally arrived in this place that I really didn't know what this place was, and that was Auschwitz. Auschwitz was taken over, and it used to be an old military base or something. That's why the kind of brick buildings, that's old Auschwitz. And they marched us out in this, they called it the parade ground, the Appellplatz. That's parade ground. And for days and nights we were out there, I guess they didn't know what to do with us. They didn't have no room for us or whatever. And that's when I lost my brother, because he got sick right away, diarrhea, terribly bad. And he couldn't be propped up even to stand up when they wanted us to line up to be counted. There was no place to go. The barbed wire already was energized. And when we could not prop him up, me and my other friends, prisoners there, they shot him beside my feet. I think that was the killer to me too. I mean, right there, it just hurt me terrible bad, because I was so close to him, and he was my pride, an officer in the military, and strong and handsome and everything, and loved him. And when they killed him, but somehow or another, I still had a clear mind, and I'm going to live. I'm going to live. I'm going to do everything possible to live, And that's when the good Lord must have wanted me to live, because when they segregated us, picked us over like cattle, lined us up, and you go right, you go left, And when I went to the left and the others went to the right, the ones that went to the right was marched off, and there's a forest right close by there. Auschwitz is circled by a forest, you might say. And you could hear the machine guns, the fire, all those people were killed right there and then and buried in mass graves. And the ones that went to the left, like myself, received our numbers, tattooed in my left arm. And I then decided, I just saying to myself, I'm going to live, I'm going to survive. And that's when I got this job that we're going to build a big gas house. We already were building it, and we helped build it. Just a huge building, no windows. It's going to be the bathhouse, they called it. It's going to be the bathhouse. Well, there was no bathhouse. It was a gas house. And me and 3 other men and several other groups just like it, they called us the Commandos, we would be working under the gas house to pick up the bodies when they were gassed, and the floor would open and drop to the cellar or to the below. and we would pick up the bodies and throw them on the wagons. But our job, our life depended on that we did not throw a body on them with rings on the fingers, gold in the mouth, or hair on the head, especially women, in those days, long hair. That was all sheared off, and great big gunny sacks we had. We filled the gunny sacks full and with hair, knocked the teeth out, put the little box hanging on the side of this flat wagon, just like you haul hay or straw, on the farm, a ranch. And rings, you couldn't pull off the ring because the hand was twisted. We had this little hatchet, we took the finger and all, and then we would push the wagon over to the crematoriums and drop the bodies there and go back and get another load. Many a times, not many a times, but times, we would push our wagons by suitcases that were laying there with all the clothes still in there that the people would bring, because they were told they're going to a labor camp and they were allowed so much to bring. They would bring the best, and we would, if we have a chance, we would dig through there, and sometimes we would find some pieces of food, even if it was spoiled. That didn't mean nothing. It went to them out, So that was a big help, to us to survive, And
I have a question, which is like, when night came and you lived through the day and you were alone with your thoughts, how did you cope with the stress of not knowing whether you would live through a next day? Did you ever reflect like that?
No, not just me, the only prayer we had, the only thoughts we had, the only will we wanted is food. The hunger was so bad, so miserable. Even the abuse by being kicked and shoved and whipped and all that was nothing like the hunger that was constantly just, and we still had to drag on because you did not perform. They just put you down right there, put a bullet through you, and ended up laying over there at the crematorium. So the most important thing was the search for food. But I think I did, not thinking about it then, but I think now why I probably had survived is because my will of living. I had a lot of hate in me. I wanted to get even for killing my brother right there beside my feet. His blood running out of him, and I have tough times talking about that. And then while I was in there, after 2 years or so, they brought my father, mother, and little sister there. And I didn't get to see him, but they were also gassed.
And how did you know that your family was brought to Auschwitz?
A friend, he became a friend of mine that came from our neighborhood, knew him, and he got some pictures out of the suitcase, and he brought them to me, and I had them for a while, but I buried them next to one of the barracks because every once in a while they would have a big search. And that would come real quick if you had an extra pair of pants on, if you had an extra shirt on, if you had a pair of socks on, or your pictures or anything like that. You was killed right on the spot. So I buried them. And when we were back there 2 years ago, Judy, my daughter, she said, "Dad, do you remember which barrack?" I wasn't sure, I thought, but then that's been 60 years ago, so we didn't.
When you were in the boxcar with your brother, and I assume other young people or people that you knew from your community, what were the conversations like? did you talk amongst yourself?
Well, there was really not a lot of conversations. A lot of people were crying, a lot of tears, were flowing. You see, I did not mention the people in that boxcar were all people with higher education. The reason we were taken then is because my brother was a Polish officer. But all the doctors in this 500,000 city and neighborhood, all doctors, all lawyers, all priests, and anybody with high education was in that boxcar, in those boxcars. And so it was because supposedly that was the word, and how it came about, I don't know, I don't remember, but that they would give the German Third Reich troubles. They're too smart for the good. So they were all taken out. And that's how my brother happened to go. And because I was 16, just as tall, and my mother was not going to let my brother go, said, you too.
So when you were in the boxcar with your brother, do you remember really anything that you might have said between the two of you?
Well, we didn't know where we're going. We thought we were actually going to a labor camp, going to work, and hopefully the war will not last long, and we'll come home, everything will be fine, But then the hunger set in, the thirst, and the smell, the heat in there were just...
I know it's difficult for you to talk about, and I don't want to pry about the incident of your brother, but at the moment when he was killed, and I guess what I'm trying to ask is that that must, of course, have been the moment you realized that this was something far more different than a labor camp.
I realized that right away because they didn't even take us to work, because they didn't even knew what they were going to do with us. We just laid there outdoors, under the stars, and finally, when they got rid of more than half of us by killing, and then they started putting us to work about building barracks, building those the gas house, building the crematoriums. So there was never any reason for them ever to think about, are you going to live or not going to live? What are we going to do? If he don't survive, he just died, And if he didn't have no use for him, we killed him.
The camp, was it German citizens that ran the camp, or were they Polish citizens?
Well, it was in the beginning. Poland was the first country, to be invaded. So in the beginning was all Polish practically, in Germans. There were German people there that were or at least that's what they were accused of, being anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler, were brought there. But then, as the war was going fast, then Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Romania, Hungary, just Albania, country after country, then France, Belgium, Holland, and all you needed to do is just listen to the language the people spoke, and you knew, or you didn't need no newspaper. You knew where they're coming from, and they were all told, by the way, that they go into a labor camp, that they need laborers, and they go into a labor camp, and you're allowed to bring so many suitcases, so much luggage along, and that's when they would come. And when the train would arrive in there, they were unloaded. And always it didn't bother me a bit then, but it bothers me so badly now, the lie. A Gestapo officer would get on a little box. There was a little box sitting there, and he would get on there, so it'd be high up. And he'd make a little speech that you have arrived to the labor camp. And the barracks are waiting for you, where you're going to live. But you're all lousy, dirty. You got to be clean first. And for the first year or so, they would even have the people undress. naked. Here, total strangers, several hundred people or 1,000 people or whatever from this whole train would be standing naked there. And he would herd them in to the bathhouse. They even, for a while, they even furnished you with a towel and a bar of soap for family. But once they got in there, there was no shower or nothing, no bath. The door was closed and the gas come down from the ceiling. And many a times, 20 minutes or half an hour, the floor would open up.
The people.
I don't know. They just called us the commando. They really didn't call us, and maybe we named it ourselves. I don't know.
Is that
It just
the other camp, or was that the guards or the other camp? People within the camp called you. Oh, did you get that?
no.
And when he placed you into the Jeep. But can you tell me a little bit about the days preceding the liberation of the camp? You could hear the bombardment.
This is the second camp
Yes,
in Buchenwald. When we were marched out of Auschwitz because the Russians were getting near, Auschwitz. They marched us out of there, and we marched across Germany, and we got to Buchenwald. And this is the thing that the last few days I was about going. I don't recollect a lot, but I do know how it happened because what Charles Kinney told me what happened. When he that was the 926 Signal Battalion that did the signal work for the 9th Air Force, and Charles Kinney. He says, I was not a liberator. I just went in there to see what's going on. But the prisoners who were still healthy, healthier than I am, and I was, they would climb all over the trucks and begging for food. And the dear American soldiers would give him the last drop of food, the last K ration, C ration. And Charles Kinney told me that he threw me a piece of hard candy.
I tell you what, I really would like to get this on tape. I think we'll let. Can you please, because of the clock, if I could have you begin telling me about the days leading up to your Charles Kinney.
When?
Because of the chime on the clock.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
Well, well, that one I don't want to shut off. No, okay. Well, okay. You want me to do it again, you mean?
Yeah, if you could just, kind of read.
Oh, sure. Well, what happened is when the bombardment, yes, and before the rumors were that we're going to be liberated by the Russians in Auschwitz. And here, the bombardment and artillery, everybody kept saying, it's the Americans. The Americans are coming. And wonderful. But they closed down the camp. They closed down the kitchen. They didn't take us out to work. Because there we went out to work in the two towns nearby, Weimar and Erfurt, and on the railroad tracks. And a lot of us worked on the Autobahn, the four-lane highway across Germany. And they didn't take us out no more. So the camp was closed, and I laid there in the gutter next to the barrack. I don't know how I ended up there, but that's where I was. And when Charles Kinney and his orderly room man, a corporal, came in, and Charles saw me laying there, and he threw me a piece of hard candy out of the K ration, just hard as a rock, piece of chocolate. And I was so that I didn't even bother about picking it up. He became a dear friend, and he's told me that many a times. And I didn't bother. And he just got out of the Jeep and just picked me up. And later on, years, I thought I weighed 87 pounds, and he corrected me several times. No, you weighed 78 pounds. Tall as I am today, or maybe an inch taller. And he put me in the Jeep, and he says, I had enough. I saw enough. That's his words. And he drove out of there. And just a few kilometers away, the Signal Battalion set up camp to do the signal work for the 9th Air Force. The war was still right there, was still in full blast. And this, when he hauled me in there, the guys were just still setting up the tents and camp and everything. But he was the first sergeant, the number one enlisted person. And somehow or another, the mess sergeant, the guy that provides the food, came around and he saw what he brought in, and he hauled me all kinds of food, He was a sergeant from Texas. And I just didn't eat it. I inhaled it, you know. And a few hours later, I got terribly sick, I guess. And they hauled me off into a field hospital. There was a field hospital set up because a lot of American soldiers were being brought there to taken care of. And I laid in there, and the Dr. Thompson, a captain, and I can't remember the other guy's name, they right away started taking care of me, whatever they gave me, you know, to. My worst thing was my mind was all messed up. I mean, I couldn't think, I didn't know where I was and all that kind of stuff. And I laid in there for 2 or 3 days to finally started clearing up. And the wonderful thing that the best medicine is American soldiers would come by and tap me on the head, tap me on the shoulder, leave me cigars, cigarettes, chewing gum. And but the smile and you know, it just, I think that gave me hope, life, you know. And my mind started clearing, and I kept thinking, my gosh, this man's got the same color uniform as the guy just a few days ago was kicking me and hating me, and same color uniform, same color skin, same color, you know, a little different insignias, different shaped helmet, but so I started falling in love with the American soldier, you know, the GI, and.
Excuse me. I hate to ask you, but when you turn your pages, Gordon, we're picking that up on audio. So if I could ask you just to be a little more quiet, a little about that, I appreciate it. So what do you think it was about those American soldiers, the 926 Signal Battalion? What was it about you that they just seemed to gravitate toward you? What do you think?
There were thousands that were liberated in Buchenwald, and I thought that about at that many a times, you know. Why me, you know? And I asked Charles Kinney, because I've seen him several times in the States after I came here. He says, oh, I don't know, you look so doggone poor, so doggone sick. He says, and you was easy to lift after he drank a couple of beers. He says, and I think the good Lord just wanted me to survive and just hauled me off in this. And every one of those men in that Signal Battalion became a dear, dear brother. Because I spent 2 years with him. After I got feeling better, I was hauled right back. And the guy that gave me some clothes, because all the clothes I had was this blue and white stripe, but they just put that in a sack. They gave me the hospital clothes to wear back to the Signal Battalion because they came after me. And when I showed up at the Signal Battalion, Sergeant Gus Farkas, who came here a month ago and spent at my banquet from Buffalo, New York, he was our supply sergeant. He took me in his tent, and that's where he had all the uniforms and clothes for the battalion. He says, he looked at me and he said, well, you need underwear, you need socks, you need shirts, pants, everything. He said, well, he says, I might as well make you a corporal. So he that's what I ended up. I just wore for 2 years. I wore that American Army uniform as a corporal, and everybody just became dear. And Gus Farkas, Charles Kinney did not come because he passed away. Another dear friend, Leo Murphy, who I asked, we asked to have him to come, and 2 or 3 others, they're all gone. Mrs. Kenny, Helen, who I got to know real well here in the States, couldn't come because of illness. And Gus Farkas in Buffalo, when he found out that what's happening here, he says, nothing will stop me. So him and Phyllis, his wife, came and spent about 3 days here, and he was also one of the guys who got up and told about putting the American uniform on me. Washington didn't know it, but Europe knew it because I became an interpreter. I'm blessed to be able to learn languages, and I knew about 6, 7 languages pretty good, and I tried real fast to learn English. Not good, but...
Can I ask, what languages had you learned?
I learned German because we had to talk German. I learned Hungarian because there was quite a few Hungarian. I learned French, not good, but good enough. All of them were good enough too. And I learned Russian, but I knew a little bit Russian from my mother's sister who used to come visit. And then I learned, tried to learn quick like English as much as I could. So I ended up also helping Provost Marshal of the company of military police that would go around and...
I'd like to ask you about that. The American soldiers asked you to help them find SS. Now, having come out of the camp, and I would assume if it was me, I'd jump right on that. So if it's not too much, I'd like to ask you about that, coming out of the camp to find the people who incarcerated you. What was that like the moment they said, "This is what we'd like you to do for us"?
They wanted me to ride along with the company of military police, and not the whole company would go all the time, but maybe 20 men or so. It just depends where we were going and who we were going to look for. And I would be the interpreter. But when I would show up there, I had my American uniform on. I had my .45 pistol on the side. And I had bullets too. And I would go there, and I was no gentleman, but I would not talk. I let the sergeant or whoever, the lieutenant, whoever was in charge of this group, he would do the talking, and I would listen and understood every word they would talk among themselves. And looking at me, I was just another MP, military policeman. And when the lie came, or cuss words would come about the Americans, my GI boot had a job. I did not kill nobody, but I didn't mind at all putting my GI boot right in the hind end. I hated him. I was no friend of him because all those was Gestapo and SS, and there were very few. In fact, there was hardly any of them that were good people. They were so poisonous, so bad. And then they would realize that I understood every word they said. In the meantime, I would find out while they were talking where they had weapons hid. And we would find weapons quite a few places. Actually, we would confiscate those and haul them off and lock them up, and they had a prison where they locked them up. All this came to an end one time in a small convoy when I traveled with about a group of probably about 20 MPs, and we stopped along the route, and the German people were suffering. That war was over with then. The German people were suffering real bad because Hitler gave orders when the German army pulled out of a town or a territory to burn everything to the ground. The food, the cabbage, the beets, the potatoes, ruin it because he didn't want to leave that for the Americans. The Americans didn't need it. We had all the K ration, all the C ration, and by that time they started shipping fresh food even over. So the German people were suffering, they didn't have food. In this one case is we were along the route, parked, country little road, and a bunch of children would come running out from the village there, and they were begging for food, and I chased them off. I hated him, And this captain in charge of this little convoy, he took me aside. He took me in the back of one of the trucks, and he didn't, so the others couldn't hear. And I wished I would have had a tape recorder or whatever. I would remember what he said. And the words he said, was from heaven, because he just completely flipped me over. I lost all the hate for the Germans. In fact, the Signal Battalion and the MPs was not safe for them to keep any food around. Like if mother sent them a bunch of cookies or a broken cake, if they didn't give it to me, I would steal it. They knew it. I said, we all too fat, and I would feed it to the children because they would hang around our camp, our base, and I was just happy to. And they all agreed, all taken.
So what do you think it was about? It was Captain Vitterius, is that?
No, Vitterius.
Vitterius.
Captain Vitterius. I don't know how to spell it, don't ask me, but...
Well, I'm just...
I don't know, he was a very bright man, and he was a man that I knew that, though, that his parents suffered quite a bit, I guess, and they came to the States, and he joined the armed forces. I knew that, and he became a captain, and he had a feeling about hate is no good, and just whatever he said, and it's just a blessing. And to this day, there is no such a thing as me hating Germans. No way. I've been back there twice to Germany and once to Poland, and no way. I think they're great people, And I had visited in schools in the States now, for an exchange student, German exchange student would come over to me, and they would cry in tears, because they knew that Uncle so and so was a Nazi, and when I get home, I'm gonna tell him. In fact, the lady across the street invited several exchange students, our neighbor here, 3 or 4 years ago, invited me over there to visit with those kids, and they were just all, well, they were not all German, they were from different parts, even Japan, and Russia, and so I've run across a lot of exchange students that they're happy to hear what I have to say. They want to know it, because they don't get it at home. They don't get it. The German people don't, still to this day, a lot of them don't want to admit it. They don't want to talk about it.
A certain amount of shame.
Yeah, because when Buchenwald was liberated, there were bodies laying as high as this house, that were not burned. And General Eisenhower gave orders. The town of Weimar in Erfurt, the towns of about 25,000 people in each one of them towns, that everybody, young and old, you can't walk, somebody carry you or put him on a wagon and bring him and come down there and see what, because they claimed they didn't know what was going on there. And that was a terrible lie, because the smell from the crematoriums and the bodies. In fact, the engineers threw a bunch of lime over those piles of bodies and left them lay, because those were orders from General Eisenhower. And I wanted all those people to go down there and see, so they don't come around and say they don't know what happened. And people used to march through their towns, drag their feet, couldn't hardly walk. And the mothers and the children would be on the sidewalk, and they would spit at us, throw rocks at us, and the mothers would laugh. Like I say, I don't hate them anymore, but this is what they did.
Well, let's see. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about you coming here. You had many various soldiers say that they would like to sponsor you to have you come to America, because they said how much you wanted to be here. And First Sergeant Ed Townley sent for you. Now, can you tell me a little bit about when you received word from him?
When Charles Kinney was the first sergeant after the war, they would go home if they had so many points. If I remember, like 55 points. I don't know how they came up with that. They would go home. And this Ed Townley, who was over in England then, serving over there, and he was transferred over to take Charles Kinney's place. And I roomed with him, became real close friend. And he also, after, I don't know, he was there maybe less than a year, 6, 8 months or so, he's going home. He had enough points to go home. And many of them, quite a few of them would say, Benny, I'm going to send for you. I'm going to send for you, because that's all I wanted. I wanted to come to the States. And Ed Townley went home, and I would say not over probably a month and a half or so, I got word from the American Embassy and also from my commanding officer that the Townley family, not just Ed and his wife, but also his father and mother, who were still alive then, and 2 sisters and their husbands who were married, and another brother who was married, they all signed affidavits that if one wouldn't, the other would, and they all sponsored me. So the papers started rolling, but and I could have came probably 6, 8 months before I did, but the provost marshal, he says, what's the hurry? He says, you got the papers now, I still need you, and this and that. So I stuck around until the call came from the embassy. And it says if you don't have him by, I think we had like 3 days or 4 days to get to Bremerhaven, Germany, to put me aboard ship, or the papers are going to be outdated. I'm going to have to start from scratch. So they had a nice big party, gave me a gold watch, and in fact, this Gus Farkas was one, and another fellow that I asked to come here, but he passed away now. Those 2 loaded me up in a Jeep and took me to Bremerhaven. And after a beautiful party the night before, and the thing that I'm proud to talk about is we had script money over there, that you could buy in the PX. Well, the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel, walked up to the Jeep to tell me one more time goodbye. He says, Benny, when you get on the ship, you can throw all that money overboard because it's no good in New York. It's no good. Or you can give it to the guys here, and they can use it. So I gave it away, and he says, but here. And he had a $20 bill, an American $20 bill, folded up in about this little square. And that was against the law to have it over there. The American soldiers was not supposed to have American money over there. But here, the lieutenant colonel gave me this $20 bill. He says, this, when you get to New York, this is the kind of a money you need. And I always think about, I've learned this expression, he still has his last nickel, his first nickel. I still got my first $20 bill. I still have it. I did not spend it. And it's folded up, and I'm afraid to unfold it.
Well, I'd like to see that. Do you still have the watch as well?
Oh, sure.
So, so was it hard? I mean, anxious to get to America, but was it hard to leave the battalion?
It was very emotional. Took 9 days to come across, and when everybody started yelling, we in New York in the Statue of Liberty, and we pulled into the harbor, and then another shock came to me because on the loudspeaker it says for me to report to the office after I get off of the ship. And I walked to the office, and there was a couple of gentlemen sitting there. They were custom agents, officers, and the Army was kind to me, and they lined up a job for me as an interpreter for the custom agents, but I had to stay in New York. I says, oh no, I got to go to Lebanon. Well, I got the Ed knows I'm coming to Ed. Well, here's the telephone number. Ed called, and you're supposed to call when you arrive, and he's going to be waiting for you. So I called Ed right there from the desk, and Ed knew all about it. And he says, you don't have to. You can just get, but it's a wonderful opportunity, and we can come see you. You can come see us, but it's up to you. So I thought, gosh, and it sounded like tremendous good money as an interpreter. So I agreed to stay 4 days or 4 nights, and I was lost. Walking the streets out of the hotel, they were all expenses paid, and I just was. I couldn't take that. I just too many people, and they didn't look that friendly like the GIs, and so I thought, no, I'm gonna go to Nebraska, where a lot of those GIs told me not to go, especially the ones from the eastern part of the country. Oh, the Indians still ran free in Nebraska, so don't go there. Well, I'm going to find out for myself. And I arrived May the 10th, 1947, a little town of then even probably 300-400 people, and I know there were twice as many waiting for me for this one car train. I took it out of Oxford, Nebraska, off of the Burlington on that into Lebanon, and the high school band was playing.
So
and I knew I came to the right place.
What was your impression when you came to Lebanon and there were all these people in the high school band, and there you are, a boy from Poland, who knew some GIs. What effect did that have on you?
A lot of tears were flowing. I got very emotional because the Townley family just super. And, Grandma and Grandpa Townley just hugged me and they said, well, we have a large family. We just increased by one more. So it was very emotional, and it ended up exactly the way I saw it. Because even after my kids were born, that was Grandma and Grandpa, and it was wonderful.
That must have been a powerful.
Yeah, it was.
moment
It
for you.
was a dream come true. Two of those sisters and their husbands came a month ago to the banquet. One from Amarillo, Texas, and the other one from down. Still live on a farm down there.
Down in Lebanon?
Lebanon, yeah, by Lebanon. All the others, Ed Townley passed away. His wife passed away. The grandma and grandpa are gone. So
Should probably check that. Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you. were with the battalion, you knew two Native Americans, soldiers.
Native Americans,
Indian?
two.
Two.
They were in our battalion, and I had a lot of fun with those guys. Well, I don't know if you got time for all this.
Well, no, I'm curious. I read a couple of stories that you had in your book.
Yeah,
so it sounded like
they were great, and I never did got. I wished I would have, but I didn't get where they were from, and the addresses. I would have loved to seen them since I came here. One was a little guy, other big guy. They called him Horse, and you probably read about. Did I say about trying to burn down the camp, and they got those GI cans, had water in, but they filled it, got a whole of full of beer, and the two of them drink that 5-gallon. Yeah, that's when we were in France, and you see, before I left there, and the war was still on in the Pacific, the Signal Battalion, I think it's in the book, the Signal Battalion was sent to Le Havre, France, to board the ship, and the Signal Battalion was going over there. And I received the 15, 20 shots right in me, like the rest of the guys, because I was going with the battalion to the Pacific. And those two Indians were there, and we were in a big camp. They called it Camp Detroit. I don't know why Camp Detroit, but yeah, we were going till the Harry Truman dropped the atomic bombs and the war was over with. And so they shipped us back from France back to Germany. But I was going to the Pacific with the battalion. That's why I'm so healthy, because I got all those shots.
But you were never truly an American serviceman.
Washington didn't know it. That's what I always say. Washington didn't know it, but the Signal Battalion and many other battalions knew it. That on some basis we were the Signal Battalion, and then there were some artillery battalions, engineering battalions, or companies. So they knew, I was there, and well, I looked like the rest of them, but uniform, and my 45 always strapped on the side of me, and I had a carbine. And
did it surprise you that that they gave you bullets?
No, I didn't. I just thought I should have it. It just made me feel like I'm just one of the other guys,
And I'm sure that must have been heartening coming from where, the situation you just come in, you were pulled away from your family, you had no one, and then the battalion just took you
then I had about 900 brothers. Yeah, it was unbelievable. To this day, and I've been back to a couple of 3 battalion reunions since I came to this country. And it was just unbelievable, The guys would show up and they're hugging and kissing, and so it was a miracle.
Oh, I wanted to ask you something. It slipped my mind now. Well, now you came here. You're settling down, and you're in the small town of Lebanon, and you meet a woman by the name of Mrs. Schneider. Sounds like a very German name.
Well, Schneider, yeah. She was an aunt to Ed Townley. Ed's father and her was brother and sister.
She sounded like she was a woman who had good connections.
Yeah, she did. She did. I came and I went to work in a bakery the following day. The man worked me too hard, Mrs. Snyder said. Didn't pay me enough, so she found me a job. I stayed with them. Had a little room downstairs. So she got my job at the Burlington Railroad. Half the hours, twice the pay. Oh, wonderful. And I needed clothes, And 3 months or so, I didn't know that such a thing. I got laid off. Me, I always say, a Polak and a Mexican got laid off, because it was on the bulletin. Me and a Mexican man. And I came, I was just brokenhearted because I really liked the job and the pay. And I come back to the house that evening, and I was just brokenhearted. And Mrs. Snyder says, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll find you a job." She was a Baptist, her and her husband, and that was on Friday when I came home brokenhearted. Sunday she goes to church, to the Baptist church in McCook, and the telephone company manager is a Baptist. And she was the type of person, she didn't take no for an answer. She says, "I got this boy and I want you to give him a job." Monday morning I go down to the telephone office and I get interviewed by the manager and the line foreman. Papers made out. A day or two later, I would have wanted to work a day sooner, but the doctor that's going to give me a physical, I had to have a physical, was out of town or busy or something. I get my physical, and I go to work instead of Monday. I go to work Wednesday, I believe it was. And the foreman says, "Well, don't worry about it. We started paying you Monday." So I never lost even a day pay, and I ended up 42 years with the telephone company.
Well, and then in working for the telephone company and your connections that made in Nebraska, in the communities, you married, you have 2 daughters, and then the doctor that delivered your daughters invites you to the Rotary Club for lunch.
Yeah, he was a tricky person. My oldest daughter was premature, so she was in the hospital quite a while, and he became quite a dear friend, because first he didn't think he could save her, but he did, and that's her right there. And anyhow, when he invited me to the Rotary Club for lunch, and I thought, gee, that's nice, the doctor. And it was a Friday, and my foreman says, "Sure." He says, "By gosh, you can go for lunch with your doctor, Dr. Carr." And so I go to lunch, and all the Rotarians there, and I got done eating lunch, and he introduces me as the program. I never was in the front of anybody speaking, and I was just nervous, shaking, terrible, bad. I told him later, I said, "Don't you pull tricks on me again like that, doctor." But that was the beginning, and there's been, if I would say 1,000 places, 1,000 times, I would not, at least that many. I can't think of the words, but I've been to places. The record that place that I've been and talked to the seniors is North Platte, Nebraska. I've been there. Last April was my 34th year, and I'm already invited for this April. And that's a record, 34, and because they're always different kids, different people. So I've been to about every town and every college in the state, South Dakota, and in Colorado, and New Mexico, and Las Vegas. A year ago, I spoke in Las Vegas to a high school of 3,500 students.
How did the people in Las Vegas find
Wonderful.
How did they find out about you?
Well, my brother-in-law's daughter teaches school there, and she comes here for holidays or whatever.
So that's the connection. Well, I'll tell you what, I got a few more minutes. I'd like to keep talking with you. I do, in regard to the talks that you give, I'd like to ask you a question, in which is, is there a reason to stop talking about your experiences during World War II? Would there ever be a reason to stop?
Not now. There was a reason to stop. I thought there was a reason. I visit with my 3 kids about a lot of things when we get on the phone, sometimes the telephone bill. and they're very bright. When the Berlin Wall fell, Poland became free, and all those other satellite countries that the communists, took over after the Germans were pushed out. There was no reason to stop, no. But then after that, when we all got the freedom, I thought, well, I'm getting old enough, I should probably quit. And then, by gosh, we ended up, with different places in the world where we still killing and dictators taking over and people asking me to come and speak again. I decided, no, I guess I just cannot quit. And my kids agreed I could quit then, and then I better not quit. So I accept so many of them, but I get more invitations than I can possibly take, And I have, after next year, I already got quite a few invitations that I accepted, that I will go. And when I get done speaking, and the teachers or principal or superintendent says, Benny, we've had all kinds of people come here and speak, and we have trouble keep the kids, quiet or interested. And I've never seen anything like it, They just so quiet, so respectful, so taken. And whenever I speak anywhere, I want the kids not back there like in church, I want them up front, right next to me, surrounded. And this spring. No, this last fall. I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I spoke to a big high school. And the teacher that invited me, the principal that invited me, graduated with my daughter. And she said, Benny, she'd been wanting me to come there for years, and I finally made it. She says, I've invited many, many different people, Army officers, because I got a big Air Force base in Cheyenne, and all kinds of different people, and I never seen anything like it. It just, not a word, quiet, they're taking it serious, and I don't mind at all to see him tears flowing from the eyes, because this is what should be, because they should have a soft heart, thinking what happened to the world then and is happening to the world now. So now, after the September 11th, I'm more and more now encouraged to speak, and hopefully I can do it for a while yet. No spring chicken anymore, and hopefully, and it does. I feel very strongly about it by the hundreds of letters that I receive, and people that talk to me about it, that I guess I just have trouble not doing what I'm doing.
Hard to say no.
Hard to say no, and they accept me, they want me, and I see what's happening afterwards, and I've had mothers come to me, fathers come to me, and they said, my kids just can't quit talking about it. Just telling the father and mother, about griping, and and I also always try to remember to say to the kids, when you go home, you ask your father and mother if last election they voted. And if they say no, that their vote, oh no, their vote don't mean nothing, they were too busy or whatever. Just tell him shame on him, from me to you to them. And I've had phone calls, and I pick up the phone, and here not too long ago, a man was on the phone, and when I answered, Marie answered it first, and wanted to know if he can talk to me, and I answered the phone, and he says, shame on you, to me. And I says, oh. I said, what did I do? I thought this maybe some friend of mine in town first. And he says, thank you, thank you, thank you. He says, I'll never, never forget the vote. He said, my daughter come home and she told me what you said. In fact, a person from Shadron, Nebraska, and that was not high school, that was a college. So I just, I think if it does good, and I feel like it does, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, I imagine, I have more questions, frankly, Penny. This might turn into something here. Many things that I'd like to talk to you about. It's almost lunchtime, though, so are you available yet this afternoon?
Yes, I knew it was going to happen because when the NBC Channel 9 came, it was supposed to be like a little...
Well, you're captivating.
Well, you didn't even ask me, Edwards, the guy that produces the show, but that I weighed 87 pounds. Charlie said, no, you didn't weigh 87 pounds. You weighed 78 pounds.
I'm going to transpose the numbers a little bit. But,
what's the difference when you're 6 foot tall, 78 or 87?
Well, I'll tell you, we can, I think,
Is
break.
It's that...
It's, I don't know how long
What time? No, it's about a mile.
Is it about a
Yeah,
mile?
I'll go with you.
Yeah.
Because that's what she just called, and if you want to be sure, I'd bring you out there.
Well, you can ride along. We have your presentation, your first speech at the Rotary Club. Now, as you work for Northwestern Bell, the company president sends a letter that says, whenever you decide to, tell your story, that if an organization can't pay for your expenses, that Northwestern Bell will.
Yeah, it became a policy.
So, I guess I'm drawn to ask, when you got word of this, when you got wind of it, did you ever sit down and reflect on why it is that people have decided that, it seems like throughout your life you've met people that have, basically opened a door for you. And this president of this huge company decides to take it on to allow you to go out and speak. And, if it cost the company money, it didn't matter. What do you think it was about that?
Well, the company received a lot of goodwill letters, or he had a lot of friends. For instance, when I was invited to speak in Omaha or in Lincoln, there were some people there, and that's not high schools I'm talking about, the banquets. And they saw him, and first it was president, his name was Jacobson, and then was Nirenberg, and both of them got the word about, hey, we saw one of you, man and boy, oh boy, and this and that. So I received, it was a company policy, about 3-page policy that I should, if I want to, it was up to me. If I'm invited to come to Mitchell, South Dakota, or Minneapolis, Minnesota, if I want to go and if I can go, go. And if they not willing to pay my expenses to fly down to Minneapolis, just make out the voucher and the company will pay my expenses. They didn't have to do that too many times, by the way, because most all of them were willing to pay, the expenses.
Okay. Now you're, of course, working for the phone company, and things are going very well for you. And,
Very well.
You have a home and started your own family. Can I ask you, when your first child was born, you lost members of your own family, and you had that first baby that's born. What kind of a moment was that for you?
It was a tremendous moment. I mean, I had a family, the Townley family, but here I got my own. And we didn't know if she's going to make it because that's the oldest one, and she was premature. And she laid in an incubator for 6 months at St. Catherine's Hospital in McCook. But Dr. Carr and Sister Pasquella, she was the head of the, it was a Catholic hospital, and sisters, and she was, whenever anybody saw her with me, she was always had an arm around me, and she would say, "Oh, that's my brother from Boston. Can't you tell how he talks?" So, and she's retired now, and I get Christmas cards from her. She back in Boston, lives in some home there. But it was wonderful, to have first child, and then 3 years later, I had another one, and in 3 years after that, we were in Sydney by then. We got Bruce, the boy. So it was it was great. I was the kind of a father that you probably don't find too much anymore because afraid that you're going to abuse him. You're abusing your child if you give him a swat. Boy, no child been hurt. You give him a swat in a hind end, plain simple. I did that because if they had it coming. And we always talked, the conversation was from kindergarten to the university, not through high school. That's why I got 2 lawyers and 1 poor school teacher, a guidance counselor, and they're all happily married. I have 4 grandkids, and one is out of college now, working, making his own, and 2 of them are in college, and 1 is still in grade school.
So the values your parents gave to you, you and your wife extended to your children.
Yeah. I mentioned that to my boy here a year ago when I was down there for his daughter's graduation, just a year ago, in Portland, Maine. And that's the only granddaughter I have. And I told him, I said, "Gee, Bruce," I said, "you're tough on your kids. You make him clean up the table." He grabbed me, gave me a big bear hug. He said, "Dad, you know where I learned that?" So it turned out great.
Well, to move along a little bit, talk a little bit about your Ralph Edwards experience. What were you doing prior to finding out that you were on the show?
I didn't know I was going to be on the show because has to be a total surprise. I just got a phone call at the telephone office. And the man on the phone says he's from Hollywood, California. Well, actually he called from Los Angeles, but he belonged to the Hollywood JCs. And he wants me to come out there and speak to Bosses Night. And I should have known there's something fishy, but I didn't. I says, "You mean Hollywood, California?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, gosh, that's going to cost a lot of money. Plus, I'm going to have to take several days off." He says, "We got plenty of money." Well, that was, I knew, should have been because the JCs everywhere always broke. And then he told me about who recommended me is some people from Omaha, like Mike Milder, who been a dear friend of mine for many years. And I thought, well, I have to ask my boss if I can have the time off. And I walked up there and asked my boss, and he said, "Well, let me call Omaha." And I know he didn't call Omaha because it was just 10 minutes and he was back. He says, "Go, whatever time you need, and if you need some expenses." So I went out there and they wine and dined me for several days. And then because I went out there on a Sunday, I believe, and the banquet wasn't going to be till Thursday. And finally, the evening came that they picked me up at the hotel, and we're going to go to the banquet. He says, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, we need to stop in Burbank at the NBC studios. And we got some clippings that they got out of quotations out of the Sydney Telegraph, out of our local newspaper. And they wanted me to talk a little bit about this for the 10 o'clock news that evening for this one station. Okay, so they took me by Burbank, the NBC studios, and makeup and change of shirt, and I'm standing there trying to read those little clippings that they had from the local paper. And they told me not to turn around, not to pay any attention, but just read it, and then we're done, then we're going to go to the banquet. And I'm standing there reading, and this man pulling on my arm. And I asked first, I says, what's all those people in this big studio? A lot of people in there in the studio. And he says, they're waiting for the Tennessee Ernie Ford show. So by that time, he's pulling on my arm, this man, and I didn't even see who it was. And he says, because I was told not to turn around. And I heard him saying, and it was just like in a fog, "This is your life, Benny Hochman." And thank God for a commercial, because I would have fell down right there. And because we always watched it at home, it was a wonderful show. And then when the show started again, the first voice behind that book, big books on the stage, it said, "This is your life." And from behind the book comes this voice, and that's Charles Kinney, the man from First Sergeant Charles Kinney from Evansville, Indiana now, who liberated me, who took me out of the gutter in Buchenwald. And then the other soldiers and the Townley family that sponsored me, brought me to this country, the telephone company manager, the JC from Sydney, who became JC president then, and my wife. And I thought, and this show is about over with, and I says, Lord, they bring everybody, but they didn't bring my kids. I thought, that's not good. And by that time, another curtain opens up on the stage, and there sits this brand new Ford Falcon, and all the doors pop open, and the three kids come out of there. So it was more than a tough old pole I can't even take. And fortunately, the show was over with and the curtain closed. And then they had a nice big party, and we had a chance to. But it had to be a total surprise.
So that was the first time you saw First Sergeant Kenny and
yes.
a number of the soldiers.
Yeah.
What kind of effect did that have on you?
Just unbelievable, because I recognized his voice, when from behind the book, and then when he got done saying what he said, he came around, and it was just two men hugging and kissing. It was more than just about more than I could stand, and then all the other people there, and the two people that put me aboard ship, in Bremerhaven to ship me over here, were there, and it was just the man that gave me the job at the telephone company, and all that.
And that had been, about 13 years since you left? Wasn't it in 1947 you left?
I came to the States in 1947, and the show was showing in 1961.
Had you seen had any GIs stop by to see you in Nebraska?
Yes, a couple of them. A couple of them came. The doctor that helped me get back my health, him and his wife flew from Washington, D.C., surprised me. And when he called me on the phone at home, I thought he's calling me from Washington, because I was corresponding a little bit, Christmas and whatever. And he says, "Well, I'll see you. Are you home?" I said, "Yeah, I'm home." Well, he was at the Fort Sydney Hotel downtown, He said, "Well, we're coming out to the house," because he already drove by. He knows they had a rental car from Denver, they flew in. And that was Dr. Thompson. And then this Tony Wasilewski from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a good friend of mine, came by with his wife. And when I knew him, he was just a single 21-year-old young man. We were having Easter Sunday at my house. And Townley was even there. and with his family, and the big Cadillac convertible pulls up in front of the house, and I seen this guy getting out with the dark sunglasses, and I went coming right on the porch, and I thought, whoa, who in the world is that? He took his glasses off, and there's Tony and his wife, and he became quite a businessman, a contractor of painting big buildings. And he had some business in California, but he lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he told his wife, this time we're not flying. We're driving. Going to stop in Sydney. It surprised me. And then Gus Farkas came once before, before the show, with his two boys to surprise me. But it's been a wonderful life, with those GIs. Anytime I seen one, I just melded.